Welcome to the Fourth Branch Podcast. I'm so glad you found us. Our premise here is simple. Let's get real people together to talk about the issues that matter to them. This episode is going to explore the topic of the evolution of the nuclear family. And I've got a question for you. How do you define family? Has that definition changed for you over time? Do you consider yourself more traditional, or do you have a broader, more modern definition of the word? As is customary on our podcast, we'll be exploring thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and opinions from across the spectrum. The way we see it, every voice should find value in the arena of public discourse, including you and me. Once again, thank you for listening. Let's get started. Welcome to the Fourth Branch Podcast. My name is Atal Osama. I am here with my co-host, my good friend Brian. How are you doing, sir?
Doing wonderful, man. Just getting over some allergies, but par for the course for this time of year.
Yeah, I know allergies are not really contagious, but all the same, I'm glad this is virtual. So
Yeah.
I hope you feel better soon. All right, so let's talk about the evolution of the nuclear family, or the de-evolution, I guess, depending on what side of the fence you're on, of the nuclear family. I think we had a chance to talk about this a little bit before, um, and I think this is a fascinating topic to try to explore and unpack. Um, my opening thoughts, kind of what we were talking about previously. It is undeniable, the shift in family dynamics in today's society. If you look at, and I'll use my family as an example, my grandfather and my grandmother moved from Alabama to Lorain, Ohio, just off the lake in the 40s. Moved there for work, found work in a steel mill. My grandmother was a homemaker and raised the children. And my grandfather worked there for nearly 40 years. Retired with a pension, and that became his life. And he provided a really good life with that model. I remember hearing the stories about them being the only family on the street with a car, the first family on the street with a color television. I mean, and it's because he worked a really good, well-paying job. That traditional middle class lifestyle uh, was well in reach for my mom and aunts and uncles. My mom tried to duplicate that model. My mom stayed home. My father and my stepdad, after my father passed, were the breadwinners. And she instilled in my brothers and I that this is what you do as a man in society, right? You go and you provide for your family. But cut to, I don't know, the mid 90s, maybe a little later. I don't know how tenable it became to try and depend on a single income to support a family. And I know there's a host of factors, combination of factors that go into that. My real question, or one of my first questions, is how do we feel about that shift? Have we lost something? Is this good for us? Have we grown? And I know you have some context you want to provide as well, but I think I kind of want to start there. Where big picture, how do we feel about what I consider to be a seismic shift in our social structure?
That is almost the perfect way. That is the perfect question for this, I think, because how do we feel, right? It's like you have a transition that is, chronologically seems like, okay, well, that's about 100 and uh, over 100 years of making this transition happen. That's a long time, right? But I think no, I think that is not a long time, and I think the real answer for most people, including myself, is we don't know how to feel because a lot of us um, are just now catching on, are catching on in this generation that something dramatic has happened. Um, we don't have as human beings that, memory that transfers down from one, insect to the other where they
Right.
know how to get back to the nest,
Right.
and things like that.
Right.
We forget, when that generation is gone, if you didn't ask them all the questions, what was life like? Like the story you gave is that's how it's supposed to happen, verbally, and it's passed down, but that's a different topic. Um,
Right.
I think a lot of us don't know how to feel about that because you have to recognize that something has changed before you can say, well, how do you feel about the change? You ask Generation Y and Z, and nothing's changed. What do you mean change?
Yeah.
You ask
Right.
them,
Right.
you ask Generation X, you ask us, and it's like, oh yeah, something changed.
It's changed.
And
Yeah.
I feel like it was changing rapidly during my lifetime. You ask our parents, and this has to look somewhat like chaos. To that generation, this has to look somewhat like chaos. Not saying that, speaking into the nuclear family, not going there saying that women shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't, but it just looks so dramatically different.
I think that's fair. I think if you were, I was having a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago, and the world that we were preparing ourselves for does not exist. It just doesn't. And there's so many examples of that. The concept, and this is completely unrelated, but just to illustrate the point, the concept of chivalry has undergone a tremendous transformation in my lifetime. Things that I was taught to do as just as a matter of being polite, I now have to consciously consider, do I grab this chair? Do I open this door? Do I, because instead of it being seen as the way it was presented to me as this is how you behave in society, it could, depending on who it is, I could be a chauvinist. I could be um, a stalker,
Misogynist, word they
a
love now.
misogynist, performing an act that I always thought was complimentary, and that's I don't want to go down there as that's a completely separate subject, but as just to illustrate the point, yeah, not hard to believe that someone who was raised in the 50s or 60s, looking at society today, and is completely lost, and that's understandable. As lost as if you took uh, a Gen Zer and transported them back to 1965, what would they do? How would they operate? How would they? I mean, it's alien, completely alien. It would be alien to them.
Mhm. Mhm. They'd be perpetually confused walking down the street and reading a newspaper and looking at anything. It would just be a mind blowing experiment
Yeah.
uh, if that could happen. But I definitely, can understand that idea of opening a door, complimentary or oppressive. Uh, like it's
Oh,
so amazing.
we got our next topic.
Because in this generation, there are quite a few that might look on you as an oppressor because you're implying that they cannot open the door for themselves, that they are the weaker, and that it plays a part in the topic we're discussing. What, how have roles changed, the nuclear family, and how has that affected the nuclear family? Like, uh, my what I'll say now to maybe stir some other things up is that transition. You know, I say it's been over 100 years, and I don't think I guess this is my theory. I do not think that it started altruistically for man's love of women and wanting to raise them up. I do not believe that at all. In any country, okay? I believe there's four parts of this. If you look back over the last a little bit over 100 years, you have control. Who was controlling the country? That changed dramatically a little over 100 years ago. The controllers, well, I know this now. This sounds like, oh my gosh, where's he going? But I'm just stating historic facts, okay? The controllers were known to have made tons and tons of money before having anything to do with America directly in creating wars.
Right.
And in that way, lending to the people in the wars, whether they lended to both sides or just one, they made a lot of money. So you have this control, war, debt cycle that began approximately 100, I will say 112
Quick
years ago.
math. So 1915, 1914.
Oh, you
What
getting
was
warmer?
what was going on?
I'll just
Hmm.
say that in 1913, everything changed for these United States of America. And the control structure, the financial system, because again, we're talking about the nuclear family. So if you're going to have a nuclear family, that means you have to be able to pay for that family. If you have to be able to pay for that family, then you have to have a job. And if you have a job, you have to have a job that makes enough money to pay for said family. So you have this thing that's control, war. War created debt. Debt was also good for the controllership or comptrollership, however you want to look at it. Debt is good for that. Once you have debt, now you have to find a way to pay for that. Who's going to pay for that? And then now you roll into a system of taxes. So in each one of these steps, you create at war. Well, men are going to go and fight the war because they're bigger and stronger, no matter what the current debate
Right.
is. And that's how it always used to be, with certain exceptions, right? So men are going to go fight the war. Well, in order to fight a war, you need supplies. You need supplies and you need munitions and you need people that are going to build all that and make it. So shortly after that transition, we began to immediately segue into war after war after war. No coincidence. And women had to go into the factories in record numbers. And what was it? Rivet Rosie,
Vivid
you
Rosie.
know,
Yeah.
the
World War
poster
II.
we all know and love now at this
Hmm.
point, became a thing. Hey, women, you do not need to be stuck. You know, the paradigm or the idea of being at home, stay at home mother was shifted from a wonderful thing to, well, aren't you kind of stuck? Don't you want to go buck rivets and make tanks and press out bullets and all that kind of stuff? And then that segues again into, I think you mentioned this before we spoke or before we started or uh, during the women's liberation movement, because the narrative had to be changed. We're not ripping you out of the house away from your children and family. We're empowering you. And I think all of it goes into that control, war, debt, taxes, transition. And I think those are the four things that really change the nuclear family.
I mean, if you look at, and I don't want to reduce this to a binary argument, but if you look at two dominant narratives, one argues this is equal work for equal pay. This is equality in the workplace. This is, and in today's terms, that has morphed into toxic masculinity, and you know, trying to redefine what success is. I heard one of my favorite people, Jordan B. Peterson, was having a conversation and talking about gender pay gap and what is the gender pay gap and what creates. And again, that's a whole nother subject to get into. But one of the takeaways that I took from that discussion was the idea of being egalitarian does not suit us psychologically when you study it broadly. There will always be individual outliers, but the most egalitarian society on the planet created more gender diversity and not less, because when given the opportunity to choose, the majority of men chose differently than the majority of women chose. Now you take that for what it's worth, but this notion and this idea that we should not have this patriarchal, dominant, competitive, all these toxic male traits dominant society. So that's one side. The other side is arguing there is thousands of years of precedent of societal organization centered around the idea that, and this goes even beyond human behavior. Uh, the proponents of this side argue that if you look at in the animal kingdom, the roles that in for animals that form societal groups, the roles are defined based upon their skill sets. And we evolved from that. And the idea coming from an agriculturally based, and so much to touch on here. I want to uh, expound upon something that you mentioned a little bit ago. 100 years ago or so, we were largely an agricultural society. Largely, right? We were moving away from, in the first decade of the 20th century, moving away from farms and moving into industry and manufacturing in a way that we didn't in the century before. When you are an agricultural base, you own what you're doing. You own it. It's your land you're working, right? The family worked the land. And that mindset transferred. You came to the city and you started a business. You became a tailor and started a tailor shop. Or you could, deli bistro, or whatever the case may be. But you owned it, right? And at some point, we shifted away from the family having ownership around something that sustained us to Mr. Rockefeller is paying really, really well to go over here, and Mr. Hershey is paying really, really well, so I can just work for him. But I don't own it. I don't own it.
Right.
And when you don't own it, it can be taken away from you. You couple that with, we are increasingly becoming commercialized in the 20th century, right? Get this new thing, throw away your ice box and get this electric refrigerator that keeps your food cold. And this great new thing called a microwave oven. And uh, you and your wife can have a car, and so on and so forth. Well, in order to drive this commercialized economy, someone has to build these items. So it becomes more and more attractive, and it's a win-win, right? If you come and work for me and help me build the things that people want to buy, you'll be able to afford the things that you want to buy. But if you look at the result of that over 5 or 6 decades, to your point, pretty soon I can no longer make enough to support what we want to buy. And this goes to the second side of the argument that I was talking about. I'll call them the traditionalists. They want, or they would argue, that we only have this problem because we're so commercialized, because we're not willing to live within our means. Do you really need the extra bedroom? Do you really need a TV in every room? Do you really need a phone every 2 years? If you're willing to live within your means, then you can adhere to that traditional nuclear family as it was intended. So I see both sides of those argument, and I wonder where we are headed, uh, because they both have merit. I mean, I can see both sides.
It's almost unfair. When you think about the last thing you said, the last, it's so unfair because we as human beings are so predictable. We are so, if there's one thing I've learned in the last at least 20 years of my life, it is that the human beings, and human beings, and human beings, we
Yeah,
have levers that can be pulled. We have buttons that can be pushed. And it's interesting how the same people that say, "Oh no, 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 hey, it's your fault. If you just live within your means, you could have the nuclear family and only one person could work." The same people that say that are the same people that hired Edward Bernays back in the beginning of the century.
right.
Or excuse me, how old am I? The beginning of the last century.
Last century, right?
I got my centuries confused. That's how old
Yeah,
I am. So they're the same people that hired a man. And for those that, aren't familiar with Edward Bernays, you would be fascinated. Fascinated. Why do you want an Escalade and not a Tahoe? Why do you want an Explorer? Why don't you want an Explorer instead of a Tahoe? Why, couldn't you deal with a Subaru instead of a, well, Edward Bernays is the reason for that. One of the focal points. And, it was not about what do you need. It was about what do you want repackaged as a created need. And so the same people that work really, really hard to change society and advertising to the point where you just feel like they make the average human feel like you just have to have each of you have to have not just a car, but a really nice one.
new one, right, right.
You can't just have, oh my gosh, you can't just have an Android. You have to have an iPhone or you are not cool.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand how this happened. So to get back to our point, it's like it's rigged. I mean, it's kind of rigged to make it so that there's plausible deniability. That we no. The controllers have not created a society where you have planned obsolescence and you are designed to be the consummate consumer. No, that's not what this is. It's you lack self-control.
Yeah,
It's like, well, how much self-control do I lack when, I try to get an affordable computer, for example, and many people could probably sympathize with this. I try to get an affordable computer, but oh my goodness, there's no built-in virus software. Wait a minute, where did viruses come from in the first place?
that's right.
Um, how come the computer always dies after about 3 or 4 years and I have to get another one? How come nothing is made to last? How come you can, some engines on cars that are sitting in junkyards with a little oil and some little tune up, you could get them fired up again.
Runs just fine. Yeah,
But you can't do that with a car made in the last 20 years. No freaking way. Try it. It won't work. It's
right.
broken.
It's true.
In fact, designed so that it's very difficult for you to fix it. So it's almost unfair. It's a cheat code. They've studied us so well that they know how to make it so that we feel like there's a need because kind of there actually is a need. If you want your computer to work, you're gonna have to get a new computer after a certain amount of time. There's almost no way around it. Not just physically, materially, but it's planned to be obsolete. That's what planned obsolescence is, meaning, oh, no, well, your computer just won't support this new operating system. And this is where we're all going with these. And that's why I'll use iPhone, just a moment of silence for you, because that's how you get played all the time. Uh, again, I guess, sorry. So I'll go back to um, the world wars, right, as the war portion. So they brought women into the workforce, right? Brought them out of the homes, away from the children, into the workforce, in a large way that hadn't been seen before that. Um, and then I'll bring in this little tiny thing called removal of the gold standard in 1971, which absolutely caused massive inflation. No one wants to care about that or think about that when they start blaming Jimmy Carter for the horrible economy and all that. The guy was just standing there holding the bucket after 10 years of ridiculousness.
Yeah, I think the oil embargo is what really sank him.
There were a
But
lot of factors.
you don't get to that embargo without removal of the gold standard. So
Kind
yeah,
of amazing, isn't it? And
yeah,
that's where the knowledge of history, right? If you don't know, then you don't know that anything's happened. It just seems like, well, isn't this the way it was? Isn't this the result of some natural? That's the biggest trick there is, that the things in society are a result of a natural evolution of events that was completely unplanned, and that all we're doing as leadership is just reacting to natural changes in the environment. And no, we're creating those changes in the environment. And if we switch from the gold standard to now what created a singularity outside of the home that snatched women out of the house. Just any women that were in there, they're gone now. You got to get out. There's a babysitter involved somewhere. NAFTA. Because you got super hyperinflation, and then all of a sudden, so everything costs a lot more. And now all of your husbands and boyfriends and, all of their jobs just got moved to another country.
right, right.
It's like the history. It was profound when you said what your grandfather was able to do, because
Yeah,
people could do that then.
yeah.
Go back to Lorraine right now and count the number of factories there are in industry compared to back then, and it's minute.
It's the whole Midwest. That model, and then and this is going to get off topic a little bit, but that model, that idea that you could work for a place, and I know a little bit about this because this is my professional life. The idea that you're going to work at a place and earn a respectable wage and then earn a retirement, that model has not existed for at least 30 years. At least.
Can I get an amen?
And from the company's side of it, the number one goal of every company, any company that's worth anything, is to control cost. That is the number one. If you get down to anybody who's ever taken lean manufacturing or Six Sigma or at the any methodology that you want to try to use, the idea is to control cost. And the biggest cost for any business will always be the human element. Humans make the errors. Humans cost the most money. And in our society, I share this with my wife all the time. Every year that I'm at my company, I am less valuable to them because I cost more every year, right? Cost of our merit increase and bonuses, and I'm more expensive every single year. And at some point, it's going to make more business sense to take 2/3 of my salary, hire two kids out of school, than to continue to pay me at what I've earned, quote unquote, in my time with that company. That's just good business. It's what I would do if I was the decision maker, because I want to control cost. The reason I think that concept is relevant to our conversation is, and you touched on this. I don't know how practical it is, and I'm not really for or against, but I would ask that traditionalist, how practical is it when you say live within your means? How practical is it for one person to be able to support a family, regardless of who it is? How practical is it for one income to be able to support a family? How practical is that? Now, if you're specialized, right? If you have, you're an engineer or uh, an electrician or uh, maybe a mechanic, if you have a particular skill, there might be plausibility in that assumption. But to ask somebody who's working in a warehouse who's completely replaceable, they're never going to get paid. There's no value in it. There are too many other people who need work. And I don't know how one could be expected in, especially today, but I felt like this, 25 years ago. It's difficult to ask one income to support a home. That's a difficult ask for entry level labor. And that's just difficult to do. And I know that's led to discussions about minimum wage and a bunch of other topics. But I think there was a societal shift out of pure necessity, right? The war effort was about supporting the troops, right? Support your husbands and make sure that they could come home safe. That's what that was about. But there was no war effort to speak of in the 80s that facilitated the increase of women in the workplace. What facilitated that increase in the 80s was this idea that if you're working, we can live in this modest area. But if we're working, we can live in the suburban area. If we're working, we can have 2 cars and our kids can go to better schools and we can own a timeshare and all of this opulence, the American dream, right? This is how you achieve the American dream. Now you look at the cumulative effect of that, and I wonder if some people feel as though the pendulum has swung too far in that direction. Because I think there were just some unintended consequences. Because now, when you're a shiftless and alcoholic and infidelity, and the woman has options now. She makes as much money as you do. Our societal changes, get divorced, child support, something that is the I really really hate, which is welfare public support. This idea that you can have a child and then require the state to provide for the family, um, instead of requiring the parents to provide for the child. So it's the conflux of all of these factors, and now we're in a society where, to the point that you were making earlier, These young people are questioning marriage at all. What sense does it make? They're questioning this idea that you need to be married in order to have a child. Why? Why is that the case? And maybe there's merit to that argument.
I think the the volatility that you spoke of is really valid. The volatility that's created by the goals and aims of companies. Because as you said, uh, I think as we both kind of alluded to in different angles, the shift was there, bringing people from being independent, independent and interdependent to being more just completely dependent on
Dependent.
a
Yep.
company,
Yep.
and that creates volatility automatically because, like you said, companies have a goal, and those the goals have also changed over the years. It was to make a profit, right? Now it's super profits. It's not just make a profit enough to keep going, live well, pay your people, and it is now a matter of superstardom at the top. They are victim of some of those people are victim of the same mentality of, well, 2 cars, but maybe if I make more, I can have 3 cars, 4 cars, five. I can have a mansion. I can have an actual mansion. And that volatility is created when now super profits are the goal, and the shareholders
Yeah. Thank you.
are
Thank you.
the true
Thank you.
beneficiaries of all of the
Thank you.
multiplied efforts.
Thank you.
Um,
100.
in corporate
100%.
in corporate speak, you'll often hear the phrase multiplication of force. And what that basically means is why your boss gets paid more than you is because he has 3 of you, and then those three have 6 each, and then those 6 have, 40 each. And so the fruits of all of that labor go up to the top
Mhm.
and rain down, you know, uh, so that, again, as we all know, the further down, the less you get, the less that's left. As the first general manager of a large company I uh, worked for, very candidly said, well, when the bonus number is brought to the United States, we basically say, here's what we want, and then here's what's left for the people next, below us. And they
Right.
say, here's what we want, and then they bring it down
Right.
to you. He said,
Right.
that's about as simple as it really is. But bottom line is that gets back to the volatility. One income is also not safe in this day and age because, again, once you buy into the idea that you need a bigger house and 2 cars, well, now you have bigger payments and bigger things that are due, bigger debt. You can't afford to have one person not working anymore. So you're slave to the volatility of the companies using what you call or what I'll call the biggest lever for controlling costs, and that is people. If a company, I think everyone knows this, it's just sugarcoated. If a company really needs to save $100 million this year, divide that by the average pay.
And reduce your workforce by that number.
That's what they're doing. They take the top part of it, or all the contractors, the blue collar workers, and then they go up into the white collar, mid level, this and whatever, and say cut from there immediately. If they need to control costs, people are expendable. And so that leads to the volatility. So now again, you have another force that's driving the women into the workforce. And we haven't spoken on what that does, right? Let's go back to the basics. Like, okay, who should stay home when with the baby? Okay, well, come on. First and foremost, there's physical incapacity, right? I mean, a man has not given milk in like ever, and if he did, a lot of people were looking at him like, dude, there's some problems happening.
Right. Right. Right.
Hey, man, stop having so much soy, But
Right.
um, there's physical incapacity. And I know there are people that will argue. I'm not arguing against women working. I'm just simply saying the logic started very simply. You know, if the baby's going to have time with the mother, that creates bonds that make human beings psychologically way better off than when they're drinking out of a bottle. Let me say that one more time for all the people who want to stop at that first issue. Breastfeeding creates stable psychological adults. When that is taken away, many psychological studies have shown the trend is beyond, you can't ignore it. It's just obvious. Without that,
which is why wet nurses were a thing
yes, yeah.
for high society. The advent of formula is it was intended to provide a solution for women who could not afford
Mm.
this. They couldn't breastfeed themselves and they couldn't afford to pay someone else to breastfeed. So,
And
and
let's, okay,
there's
go.
another product to sell. So
Yes, yeah, and you have to have it, right? You just have to. And if you mention any of those things that you just mentioned, I just want you to know there will be 1,000 people that will jump on you and say, "Well, you're being insensitive to the women who can't express breast milk." No, has nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. Okay, it's a statement of fact, and I'm sorry, for the ones that can't, but it's a statement of fact. All we're just trying to talk about the new why the nuclear family
right,
is dysfunctional,
right.
right? And factors that lead to the decisions that kind of break down the nuclear family from what it used to be. And that is a big part of it. Who stays home? It's like, well, practically speaking, you know, uh, mom is needed. Like, not dad does not psychologically give the same level of connection and safety as mom. We all know this. And what I mean is early on in life. I mean from just born to 3, 4 years old. Mom is key.
Yet and still, the argument is being made that that is a myth, that that is a societal construct, that a man can nurture just as well as a woman can, that a woman can provide just as well as a man can. That those are societal constructs, and you would be shouted down in in the social media streets for suggesting that there is some natural uh, positioning between males and females.
And these are people who, and I forgive them because I often say I need more hobbies, instead of researching so many different things at
Yeah.
certain levels. But these are people that don't understand the influence of electromagnetics, the influence of
Mm.
vibration and frequency, and the absolute bond in that way between a growing fetus, a baby, and the mother. That is not there. I'm sorry. I'm a dad and I love my kids to death. And this makes me slightly jealous. I'm kidding, of course.
Right.
That bond with mom is on a metaphysical level. The literal vibration that her body gives off to that child says safe. It's not the same vibration that the father's body gives off. It does not give the same signal. Okay, and for people that don't understand that, the reason you like to pet your cat is because it vibrates at a frequency that makes you want to pet it. So go research that if you don't want to get into human beings just yet. Next time you're petting a cat and it starts purring and it's tricking you into feeling comfortable. It's actually making you think it's a baby. But anyway, that's too far on this.
Right. Right.
So people that will shout you down don't understand what it is at a basic level to be a human being, to be a baby, to have that bond with the mother. You will not get that with the father because you weren't made, crafted in the, I'll just to get super spiritual, in the aura of your father. You were bathed and crafted in the aura of your mother, and that is what makes you feel naturally comfortable in ways that the baby doesn't even perceive. It just knows it feels more comfortable there. And that lasts for years after birth, not as a um, option, but it was a millions of years of safety mechanism. Where are you safe? How do you know you're with mom and that you shouldn't scream? So that mom will look and see, hey, somebody else is holding me or picking me up, or what? But I'll leave that to people to verify. You know, dissolving the nuclear family is stereotype, pushing stereotypes, creating stereotypes so that the women's liberation movement could be effective. Well, if you're at home, then you're a loser. Oh my God. Like who? That was completely made up and contrived. It was ridiculous. No, you're not. You are the primary, you're the God of those children, and they are the next adults on this planet. You were creating people. Again, that's why mom has so much influence on the child. You know, the things she says to the little boy can either make him a strong man or a weak uh, vessel that could have been man, because she's the God. Dad, well, yeah, okay, that's the lightning and thunder, right? That's the,
Right.
wait till your dad gets home. But
Right. Right.
you're emotionally crushed because mom's upset. You're internally and you're just crushed because mom's upset. You're only worried about your cookies getting warmed up when dad gets home.
Right. Right. Right.
You'll be all right with him,
But you no boy wants to disappoint their mother.
Yep, yep.
No boy. Yeah.
So I just think a lot of the generalizations get in the way because again, I don't think in this talk we're gonna be able to solve it, but that's not what we're here for.
Yeah. Right. I think again it is certainly a complex issue, and I do feel like there are merit on both sides. If asked, if I had to pick a side, while I have much fondness and appreciation for the traditional nuclear family, I would have to concede that on a practical level, I do not see how you could ask one person to provide for a family in today's environment. It's for me, it's not a matter of preference. It is a necessity that you have a dual income household just as a baseline. That's as a baseline. That's to make sure that you're eating and have a place to stay that's fairly safe, and you can provide the basic needs for your home. And I'll add to that, I am not a proponent of public assistance. I believe that able-bodied adults should be self-sufficient. So when you factor that in, I'm asking these adults not to get on food stamps, not to get on cash assistance. I'm asking them to be fully responsible and engaged in their lives. And it would be silly of me to have that position, and then on top of that, expect one person to be able to provide that in this environment. I just don't think that that is tenable. I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up with that traditional model. I'm fond of it. A lot of great memories of my mom playing with me in the yard, and cooking breakfast on Saturday mornings, and I remember that walking me to school. But on a practical level, man, I just all of the other arguments aside, and they're all valid arguments. I just don't see how, unless you've got a salary coming from one person, you know, $550,000 salary coming from one person, then you might be able to make it. But if somebody's making $25 an hour, you need two of those. I just don't see any way around that. So I apologies for the those who might take offense at my position. I would argue that, and I kind of want to get into this a little bit. I would argue that in America, we don't believe in living within our means. That is not a principle of ours. And I think it is a misnomer to suggest that we even think about going that way, because that's how you get Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey's and it's this compulsion to exceed and excel, and that's how you get that. But there's another side of it, for every ultra successful person, you're also going to have an ultra failure. You're going to have the ones that just never got it together. And in my humble opinion, you have to be willing to accept both. And I don't think that we should move away from our commercialized. I just think we should set realistic expectations and let people know if you want that, that's great. But don't think that you're going to take your kids to Disney every year and you work in a department store. Those two things are not commensurate. You can't do it, but you can't do it like that. And that would be my argument, that if that's your goal and that's what you want to do, we need to look at what vehicles are available for you to get there, not take that away from people and say you shouldn't be trying to take your kids there, because I think that's kind of what makes us who we are. That's my thought on that.
I think that the necessity of um, welfare, because again, as Gen Xers, that's the word we're used to, right?
Right.
There's so many other acronyms and abbreviations for it now. I've lost count. Thank goodness.
Right.
I knew it real well though when I was a kid, though. But the necessity of it is part of the breakdown of our society from all of the factors that we mentioned before. If we didn't have, gigantic inflation, that is a part and parcel of how our entire country runs. Our monetary system is based on creating poverty, is a short way to say it. Um, it is based on creating ultra oligarchs and maintaining them.
Yeah.
And all of our tax code is written so that the rich stay rich and the poor pay more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You get a W-2, F you. You know what I mean? Like, it's the way it works.
Yeah.
Like, and I think welfare is a response. It's like a stopgap that was thrown out there to say to the people who are left out. Because one of the reasons that, people needed the welfare and couldn't go get a job at a factory is because the factories closed and went to other places. So, I mean, the nature of our capitalistic society is run in a very much predatorily capitalistic way and not really what could be a better version of capitalism. Like, best example, and again, this ties, and I think people who are listening see already how this ties back to our topic. But if you have a military budget of close to $1 trillion a year,
Yeah. 898, I think.
but you know that if you cut that by 20%, you could alleviate so many problems in your country. And all I'm saying is, from roads, like I'm not saying giving things directly to people as handouts, because that again, I agree that does not work. That pacifies people and makes them not try as hard. It incentivizes them to not try that hard because, well, I'm gonna eat tomorrow anyway. I'll hold off the difficult thing till next week, and next week becomes 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Reallocating those things to places in your country where you invigorate thought, action, physicality in children. I mean, build make the roads right and passable, and so that a little bit of water doesn't wash them out. Open some gyms and fitness places and that are accessible to a lot of people. Um, have real programs that help people who are trying to start businesses. Um, I think it's a necessity brought about by the destruction of our economy because of the way it runs. If you have an economy that runs on debt, meaning there's no money in the first place to have the economy, right? Anything that is the one thing, this is where you have to reverse it. The only thing that has any real value at all, and this is what people need to understand, is your time. Your time and your energy and effort. If you master that, and I don't want to sound all, highfalutin or whatever. Let me just, how do I say that? If you figure out ways to use your time and energy in the best way to benefit your family and yourself, instead of tr- going into a place and saying, oh, I am here and I buy in 100% to the goals of this company and we're a family and no, you're not. When you buy
So
into that, you make it more likely that you're going to end up taking that handout by necessity when they decide to
it's
lay
a
you off.
certainty. It is a certainty that company will not take care of you. They will not.
If you happen to make it 30 years, or 35 or 40,
The
that's
odds
it.
of that is astronomically low. The odds of that is low
Yep.
of you staying in one place for 30 years. It's I don't want to. It, it's hard for me not to consider it to be nefarious, but in some respects, I feel lied to in that regard. That an education is going to lead to a job, and a job is going to lead to security, and security is going to lead to um, tranquility, and that's not what happens. That's not what's happened. Not at all. And no, I would, to piggyback on what you're saying, if you are working for a company, a landscaping company, and you feel like you are an excellent employee, your security is not in how good of an employee you are. Your security is in the knowledge that you've gathered while you were working at that company. And the best thing that you can do is to pivot to where you can make that knowledge work for you and not be beholden to this company, because eventually that relationship is going to dissolve. Eventually. That is a certainty. And, employee of the month programs are designed to provide a sense of value and belonging to an organization. But why do they want to create a sense of value and belonging? Why would they want to do that? Because they need to retain you for as long as they need you, not the other way around. I could talk about that all day. Um, the nuclear family was built upon principles like in my grandfather's example, right? He was able to do what he did because he went and worked, and U.S. Steel took care of him, right? Did right by him. And I just want to point out, U.S. Steel does not exist today. All those pensions that they paid out ultimately became their undoing because,
I have to say this. Oh my gosh. We might as well just call it the undoing of the nuclear family,
yeah,
the sabotaging of the nuclear family, the sabotaging of the average family, period, and average people. You're saying that, US Steel doesn't exist anymore, right? Well, I'm going to tie this back. Don't worry. So it's like Social Security, you know, is running low and, all that sorts of thing. So now our current government is saying we need to look at that and see if there's, something that we can do with some of that money and blah blah.
uh-huh.
What most people need to understand is that money has absolutely nothing to do with money that your government is giving you. That is your money, literally. It is your money. From its founding, it came from you. It came from workers. It did not come from the government. It came from workers and companies and corporations that are still here and ones that are gone. In dollars. Okay? There is enough to cover us. But the fact that there's even discussion and talk of there might not be as much in 2035 or 2040 is again why you have to, in order, if you ever want to be able to take care of your family and bring back anything like a nuclear family, even if it's changed to where two people work and that's the new definition. If you want
Sure.
to keep that even and not let that slide away and slip through your fingers, pay attention to the fact that, and I'm sorry to say this, but they're always coming after your money. And when I say they, I mean everybody. And when I say your money, I mean the money you have and the money you don't even have yet. They want it. It is a fact of this life. This is a giant competition. It's a giant competition. And like Liam said, if you take that handout, you got to understand no one's giving you anything so that you can be better in the competition. The only reason they're going to give you something is so that you don't compete, so that you're only a consumer. And that goes back to why we need all this stuff. And then you tie that together with diminishing jobs, diminishing pay. Even when you get that raise, okay, so you've gotten raises for the last 4 years, right? And you're like, oh, good. I even got a 3% raise last year. You got 12% raise. Well, the value of the dollar has gone down about 20%.
Right. Right. It's a joke.
You didn't
It's a joke.
actually get a raise at all. You
It's a joke.
lost
Right.
buying power,
Right.
which again goes to ripping people, extra people out of the home. And now the latest phenomenon, pushing the young people back into the home
So I'm
because now you need three, four incomes just to keep one
so
house going.
I'm in a new development here, and the houses that they're building now, they're calling them next gen homes, so that your young person can just move into this apartment style suite in the house. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it is that's the transition that generation whatever Y double prime,
Right.
won't understand that there was anything ever different than this. They'll say, "Well, didn't people always just move in, stay with their parents and
It's almost full
parents
circle.
parents,
It's
the
almost
parents,
full circle, man. It's
yeah,
almost
yeah,
full circle. Like it used to be, and maybe you're right. So maybe this is what the new nuclear is going to be. Because multi-generational homes used to be the standard. That
in a,
used to,
in a
and
slightly different way than what is happening now.
yeah,
Multi-generational used to mean your grandparents were with mom and dad.
right.
Now it's going to be grandpa, mom and dad, you, and maybe your kids
And
are
your
all going to
kids.
be under
Yep.
the same roof because that's the only way that you can afford it. So I guess, I'll say this as my last, we need to look at the transitions that have taken place in society when it comes to our families. And I think this is a great topic because it talks about family, which is the most important unit on this planet. The family is the first unit. How you run it, how it lives, how it expresses itself throughout the world. Um, and if you don't look at the trends, if you don't look at what's happened and the why, then you won't be prepared for what is coming. It's not fortune telling. It's not a crystal ball. It's human beings do the same stuff. The plans are communicated. They're in your face. Pay attention. Look at what is happening to the family and why. What's happened to jobs and why. What is happening to the dollar and why. You don't have to be, seriously, folks, you don't have to be a financial analyst with a business degree and work on Wall Street to understand these things. Don't let people tell you that. Just scratch the surface and you'll see what I mean. Look at the history. And what that will enable you to do is you'll be able to respond to the changes that are coming because you'll see them before they get here. I'm here to tell you, look, I'm not the smartest person on the planet. I'll just say, if I can figure it out, I know a whole lot of people can figure it out and figured it out a long time before I did. Take a look. Look at what's happening. Pull back the curtain. The wizard is there. The wizard is there and it's powerless. It's powerless against uh, the majority of us understanding what they're trying to do. And
You
I
know,
guess that's what.
yeah, what I want to say is that I think it's, in my opinion, I think it's undeniable that the dynamic the paradigm has shifted. Family is no longer defined what it was 50, 60 years ago. Now, whether or not that's good or bad is a subsequent discussion. Understand, to your point, Brian, that by nature we are social creatures, and establishing a family unit, no matter what that looks like, is to your benefit. And I would encourage anyone to push back against the notion that A, family has to look a certain way in order for it to be family, and B, that you have to have these elements in order for the family to be successful. There will always be variation. It's not a cookie cutter solution, and like you said earlier, this is not one of those topics where we can just definitively after an hour, hey, we've got the answers for this. That's not the case here. For some people, that traditional model is going to be best for them. You should pursue that. For some people, this new model is going to be best for you, and that's what you should pursue. What you should not do, though, is allow yourself to believe that you don't need a model, that you do not need family. That you should not do. And don't allow yourself to be shamed on either side, right? You're a woman and you're not working and you're choosing to stay home, and you don't allow anybody to shame you for that. If that's the model that works for you. You're a single mom and you're daycare, and you don't allow anyone to shame you for that if that's the model that is working for you. And we'll have opportunities, I'm sure, to unpack some of these high ideals and concepts in the future. But I would hope that wherever we land on these issues, we keep that basic premise that family is important, and we need to make sure that we protect that entity, because, and for a lot of the reasons that we discussed today, it's the only real entity that most of us will experience in our lives. It's worth protecting. We can have a debate about what it needs to look like and what role it should play. But I will just argue that we should absolutely protect it. So, did you have anything you want to add to that, man? I know we're at our time.
I think that's well said.
All right, man. Thank you again so much, and we'll do this again next week, sir.
All right, see you then.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. This is Brian. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to support us and our mission to foster real dialogue, you can find us on most major social media sites, including Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, Threads, and TikTok. Just search for the Fourth Branch Podcast with a numeric 4. Please reach out to us if you have a comment or an idea for a show. We mean it when we say we want to hear from everyone, and we're serious about including you in the conversation. Got a topic that you're passionate about? Let's talk about it. We'd love to get you on the show and allow you to express your views. Once again, thanks for listening. Can't wait to talk to you soon.